the Harvard Graduate School of Education, working at the nexus of practice, policy, and research.
Well, hello, everybody. I think we're ready to begin. It's just so wonderful to have the Ask With lecture hall full. And I have to say, I'm not surprised that it is, given the guests that we have this evening. I'm Kathleen McCartney. I'm Dean of the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all here to this very special Ask With Forum. At the Ed School, we often talk about measuring success by the impact that we have on the lives of learners. And by that standard, tonight's distinguished speaker, Eric Carle, has been phenomenally successful. For example, you may be interested in knowing that The Very Hungry Caterpillar has sold a copy somewhere in the world every single minute since it was first published 41 years ago. Yes, it's true. It has been translated into 45 languages from Swahili to Catalan, and it is one of the most successful books of all time, and I'm not just talking about children's literature, one of the most successful books, period. One children's book author has called The Very Hungry Caterpillar one of the pillars of children's culture. And it is not an understatement to say that Eric's work has found its way into the hearts of millions of children throughout the world, including my daughters, so forgive me if I share a story or two. But my daughter Kimberly's first word was not mama, it was bear. It was bear. And I could never get through The Very Hungry Caterpillar with Caitlin. We would stop at this page and I would have to hear her say, I like the ice cream cone the best. No, I don't like the sausage. Yes, I like the lollipop. No, I don't like the hot dog. And I suspect many of you had the same trouble getting through this book. And if you've read it, then you know it doesn't matter how many times you read it. When you see this page, there's a sense of wonder and delight. For exactly these contributions to the lives of children, Eric was given the American Library Association Laura Ingalls Wilder Award in 2003. This award honors an author or illustrator whose books have made, over a period of years, a substantial and lasting contribution to literature for children. This is just one in a long list of awards and honors, including the National Education Association Foundation Award for Outstanding Service to Public Education, Outstanding Friend of Children from the Pittsburgh Children's Museum, and the John P. McGovern Award in Behavioral Sciences from the Smithsonian Institute. As educators, we can appreciate Eric Carle's great works on so many levels. The books are perfect teaching tools. They utilize prediction, pattern, and picture cues. That's for the language and literacy students. And they foster emotional development. That's for Bob Selman. Eric has said that he writes to try to help children adjust to school and its unknowns, and I'm quoting, "The unknown often brings fear with it," he says. "In my books, I try to counteract this fear, to replace it with a positive message. I believe that children are naturally creative and eager to learn. I want to show them that learning is really both fascinating and fun." I suspect you will all agree that his artistry is unparalleled in children's literature. He has illustrated over 70 books using his distinctive collage style. And I want to thank him for his graciousness in accepting my invitation to speak. We are so honored that he designed a poster for this event. By the way, it was a poster we couldn't keep up on the walls. And we are very grateful that he will be signing books for our community afterwards. I know his fans will treasure his signature, as I do. The poetic title of his talk is The Education of a Good Picture Writer. Please join me in welcoming Eric Carle.
Thank you very much. Oh, here it is. Thank you for your kind introduction. right off the bat, I would like to say I'm very awed to speak to Harvard School of Education because I know very little about education. That's true. And I will prove this in my speech. My own education was disastrous, and I'll talk about that too. And I quit my formal education at the age of 16 before the school year was over. And I just, as I said, know very little about education, and I cannot give you real advice how to educate. But there's one important thing I've made. If you watch animals, which I do a lot, if you watch a deer giving birth to its young, or a wildebeest to its young, the mother will always walk a little ahead of time. The mother knows the right distance, not to be too far away and not to be too close. If the mother is too far away, it's obviously the baby cannot follow. And if the mother is too close, the baby feels no need to follow. That's the only advice I can give you. Through my work, I have visited many schools in the past, and very often children would say, we did you last week. And I didn't want to let on that I didn't know what it meant. So I went home to my wife, who is a former Montessori teacher and special ed teacher, and I said, Bobby, they said they did me last week, and I don't know what it means. So she explained what it means, that they did a report on me. A child wrote to me several years ago, "You are a very good picture writer." So, and I wanted to bring in the word education in my speech, so I used that. I was born in Syracuse, New York, in 1929. Shortly afterwards, the Wall Street crashed. In 1935, I started my formal education with Miss Fricky, who one day called in my mother and told her that her boy loved to draw and was very good at it, that she and my father should nurture their talent, and they always have. Miss Fricky, I don't know what she looked like. She was a wonderful, wonderful woman, and I remember a large sun-filled room, big windows, and colorful, and she gave us large sheets of paper with colorful paints and fat brushes. And I don't know what she looked like, but I do remember my report card. Here it is. I also remember that I went to school every day happy and whistling. So everybody's studying. I see everyone is studying my grades. Several months later, my parents, German immigrants, decided to return to Germany. My German grandmother had come over to visit, and my father is one of 5 children, and 3 of them immigrated to the United States. So Grandma came to visit her children and made them, or tried to make them homesick. None of them, her children, fell for it, but my mother did. So they remember. And my grandmother, she would tell me stories and things. One funny thing is she, I don't know if I should say that one. She went to the word to poor in German is schütten. So she went to the grocery store to buy potatoes, and he wanted to put it in a bag, and she held up her apron and said, no, just shit it in here. The grocer refused to do it. She also told me I had Schlappohren. As you can see, I did have Schlappohren. So we sailed on to Germany. Okay. What did I do here? 7, that's right. And again, I started school in Germany. And so the little American, within a very short time, became a German Tyrolean. And for weeks, my mother, I haven't remembered that, but my mother told me that for weeks and weeks, for months in fact, I asked, when are we going home again? And once I realized that we were not going home again, I decided to become a bridge builder. And I would take my beloved, this is my maternal grandmother, my beloved grandmother, I would take her by the hand and take her to my beloved land in Syracuse. I also miss my playmates. That's Carlton and his sister Claire and I. And I guess you recognize me. And after I had left, he wrote this heart-rending letter. I miss you. When are you coming back? You know, for a 6-year-old child, we adults often forget that friendship is important for children. We always think when they grow up, they will have friends and partners and get married and things like that. No, sometimes when I visit schools and I say, tell me about your friends, they put their arms around each other and they are so happy. So very important it is for children and friends. 20 years later, I visited and I sent this picture here home to my mother, and then she returned a picture you just saw a couple of seconds earlier. I walked into, he didn't know that I was visiting, and I went to his house and knocked on his door, and I said, do you know who I am? And he said, of course, you're Eric. So that's right. This early and deeply felt relationship is reflected in Do You Want to Be My Friend? My new teacher in Germany was a nice and friendly man. And there you see me. And on the first day, he asked us to draw a picture on our little slate boards. And he waited a little bit, and then he started giving notes. I call it notes. Grades. In Germany, they call it notes. And he gave grades. They go in Germany from 1 to 6. 1 is excellent, and 6 is failed. So he gave me a 3, and then he walked through the class and gave notes, grades and grades and grades. Halfway through, he stopped, scratched his head, walked back to my slate, erased it, and gave me a 1. So I knew school would be fun again, and I went off every morning whistling, but it was not to be. For some reason, I was transferred to another school within a week or 2, and now my new teacher was a small and angry man who quickly introduced me to the pain of the thin bamboo switch, 3 on each hand held this way. From that day on, I feared and hated school. Now, in this new class, it was small pieces of paper, hard pencil, a ruler, and a warning not to make mistakes. The door had closed again. In Germany, I became acquainted with the classics Max and Moritz. Maybe some of you know that. No? No? Oh. We're a little off here. There we are, Max and Moritz. This is from the Struwwelpeter book. No, sorry. Max and Moritz, they are the town rascals. Now, here we go, got a little mixed up here. No, it's too fast. What did I do? Whatever. Max and Moritz. Let me see. Oh, I'm sorry, I got something. I'm sorry, whoever doing this. Let me go back. I have to do this right. In going back to Syracuse, Sunday mornings, my father would read the funny papers to me. And often he would explain the various styles of the books about perspective. One cartoonist would do only side views, and another one used perspective, and he would explain those things to me. And my mother would say, "Oh, no, Eric is much too small to understand about perspective." But anyway. I did not have many books as a child, but I did have Mickey Mouse. Loved Mickey Mouse. He was my hero. And Flash Gordon. I love Flash Gordon. I especially loved the women he was forever rescuing. They were he rescued them from falling airplanes, evil kings and meteors crashing towards Earth. So even the 4-, 5-, and 6-year-old boy is aware of sexy women, I guess. And then the Max and Moritz terrorized the little town. They terrorized the teacher. They terrorized the tailor, and so forth and so forth. And then the 10th bad deed they did, they get punished for that. They are in someone's barn. They're cutting in these sacks of wheat. The farmer catches them, takes them to the miller. Little Max and Moritz get ground up, and the ducks come and eat them up. Then there's Struwwelpeter. I talked about that. Incidentally, Mark Twain translated this book into English. It sold well over 100 million books and is still a bestseller in Germany. I have a couple of examples here. In one, the mother goes out shopping or whatever and tells her girl not to play with the matches. But of course, the girl plays with matches, catches fire, and when the mother comes home, she finds a little pile of ashes. In another case, mother tells her boy not to suck thumbs. Of course, he does. And the tailor comes out, and now the little boy has only 8 fingers. It's a bestseller in Germany. In Germany, my father and I continued to explore our surroundings. We would rescue a swallow that had damaged a wing, I remember. He taught me how to catch a lizard in the morning when the lizard was still stiff and cold, rather than in the afternoon when the warm sun has made it quick to catch. And my father always insisted that we gently return the lizards and whatever we found, back to where we found it. On our nature walks, we lifted rocks and peeled back the bark of dead trees and looked at beetles and other crawly things. Often on Sunday mornings, we would go for a walk, and we would wind up at the Schloss Solitude that had a fabulous view along the country. He told me the story on one of these walks, the story of the willful and spoiled Duke of Württemberg, who 200 years ago fancied a sleigh ride in the middle of the summer when his subjects were harvesting the crops. The farmers had to abandon their work and for days spread salt on that hill so that the Duke would have his sleigh ride down the hill. And I think this was a lesson in tyranny. When, in 1939, when I was 10 years old, my parents and I had our first and last vacation, and here it is in the Black Forest. There were rumors of the pending war, and I think we left a little early because of the war coming. And my father was drafted into the German army in the first day of the war. And he didn't return until I was 18. I was 10 when he left, and he didn't return until I was 18. He was more than 2 years in a Soviet prisoner of war camp. 30 years later, I would serve in the American Army. So it goes, to quote Kurt Vonnegut. I had, in Germany, my grandfather, he always wanted me to become a doctor, because in Germany to be addressed as Herr Doktor is just, is very important. This was my answer. Then he said, well, at least become a dentist. They still call you Herr Doktor. Again, no. He said, Eric, you will amount to nothing. Was very disappointed in me. I was so angry at his reaction that I went into his bedroom, locked it from the inside, and tore down the wallpaper. From that time on, he left me alone. That was the end of my grandfather's education. As an 11-year-old boy, I spent my vacations on a farm. The owner, he was in his mid-90s, never spoke to me. And then his unmarried daughter ran the household. And here I learned to milk a cow. Oh, next one. Here I learned to milk a cow. Chicken scratched on the dung heap in front of the house. In the garden in the back, I was mesmerized by bees around, flying around a beehive. I had been raised a non-practicing Protestant here in this 100% Catholic village in Bavaria. I experienced a rich and deeply felt faith. Every Sunday morning, I joined my host at church services. I loved the ancient church, the thick walls, the Latin prayers and the songs rising to the vaulted ceilings, the priest in his ornate robe, and I was intoxicated by the smell of incense. I just loved the Catholic Church at that time. The tiny village was truly stuck in the Middle Ages. There were no cars. Saturday mornings, a truck would pull up and cart away from the milk house one big round Swiss cheese that had been made during the week. Later in my life, Bruegel's Harvest became one of my favorite pictures, and I think it has a lot to do to my days on the farm. At the end of the summer, I would go back to the city where my mother and I spent many nights in our cellars in our bombed-out city of Stuttgart. Halfway through the war, we school children and our teachers were put on a train and taken to a small town to be evacuated from the bombings to the big cities. I was lucky to be assigned to a wonderful family whose name was Gute Kunst, which translates into good art. And they were a wonderful family, and I'm still in touch with them. By now, the boys 14 and 15 were the men in town because the boys 16 and 17, 18 were at the front and not available. It did not take long for a pretty 18-year-old girl to take a liking to me, and soon I took a liking to her. My education was taking its course. In high school, only art classes interested me. Herr Krauss was my art teacher, and this was at a time in Hitler's Germany where modern and expressionistic and impressionistic and abstract art was considered degenerate art. Herr Krauss, one day, I was maybe 11 or 12, asked me to his home, his house, and secretly showed me reproductions of the so-called degenerate art. He says, I am instructed to teach you realistic and naturalistic art, but I like your loose style. Look at the looseness of this art here. Then he got agitated, and these Nazi charlatans, he said, they have no idea about art. I had never seen art like this before, and it left a deep impression on me. I also was surprised by Herr Krauss' open contempt of the Nazis. And this was an experience I've never forgotten in my life. In order to open that door a little to this young boy who liked colors, Herr Krauss was willing to risk so much. Then one day the war is over, schools were damaged, destroyed or closed for lack of heating material. And when my school was reopened, I asked Herr Krauss what professions were open to me, a boy who loved color and design and paint, and who hated school so much. He recommended that I study with Professor Schneidler at the nearby Academy of Applied Arts. And if you look at this picture, you know exactly which one is Herr Professor Schneidler, right? He had been in World War I, he had been an officer, Prussian officer, you still can tell it. I had just turned 16 and I now had found a new master, whom I, to this day, honor and try to please. Here I learned the practice of the graphic and applied arts. Type design, for instance, a poster, the poster art. We people often don't, the layman doesn't know that there's a person behind all of these things. Poster art, wallpaper, postage stamp, somebody has to do that. Houseware. There we go. Textiles, calligraphy, book jackets, just to name a few. This is what I learned. Schneidler insisted that this had to be done with great care and a sense of responsibility and integrity. All visual pollutions had to be avoided. We speak of all kinds of pollutions. There's also a lot of visual pollution going on. During the war, to mislead the Allied bombers, the buildings were camouflaged in greens and grays and browns. Fashionable colors were absent. The public mood was gray. Even the weather in Central Europe is gray a lot. I believe because of that grayness, I now embrace color more than anything in the world. I'm passionate about it. Towards the end of my studies with Schneidler, Mr. Lovegrove, the cultural attaché in the U.S. zone, inquired at my school for a young poster designer. And that was my first job when I was 20 years old. During the war, the Nazi propaganda depicted the United States as a land of gangsters, chewing gum, and skyscrapers. The America House that came after the war tried and did counteract this vision. The America House was filled with American magazines and books, plays were performed, movies shown and discussed, seminars conducted, music performed, and ideas exchanged. Here are a few examples of my posters for these events. Tennessee American culture was introduced. Public relations. This was until then an almost unknown concept in Europe, what public relations was. So it's called Menschenarbeit, man and work, factory and public, which we call public relations. The man Klaus Kister had been a German prisoner of war in the United States and learned about public relations. So he gave a talk about that. And I did the posters for the events. And here are a few examples. Oh, did I do that on? Okay. Did we? I don't know what I. Did you do it before that? Okay. The first one is Glass Menagerie, right? Yep. Oh yeah, first Glass Menagerie. Go on. Yeah. Okay. 12-tone music. Or sometimes it wasn't about American culture in a concert here. 2 years later, I arrived in the United States, 1952. I arrived in New York with a very nice portfolio and $40 in my pocket. It was suggested to me that I go to the art director show to see what's going on in the United States. There were beautiful designs by Leo Leone, who at that time was the art director of Fortune magazine. They did fabulous covers and layout and hired enormously wonderful illustrators and so forth. Well, I left the show and I went to the telephone booth and dialed Judson 61212 to call up Mr. Leone, and I was lucky enough to get him on the phone. I told him I like his work, maybe he likes my work. Come up tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock. I said, oh, by the way, I'm also looking for a job. Mr. Leone looked through my things, took me out for lunch, left a tip that was like an enormous amount of money to me at that time. We returned from lunch. He said, made a phone call, gave me a little note, and the note said, George Precorian, promotion art director of the New York Times. And he said, I believe they are looking for a young designer. And two days later, I started as a young designer at the New York Times promotion department. So Leo Leone had become a door opener for me. Leole and I stayed in touch occasionally, and he went on to do Little Blue and Little Red, Little Blue and Little Yellow for his grandchildren. And he suggested I do children's books too. And he even set up 2 appointments with his editor, and both times the editor liked my work, but that was it. I would have to wait years and years later for Bill Martin, who had seen an ad of mine, and based on that, after the New York Times, I worked for advertising agency that specialized in pharmaceutical advertising, and this was for an antihistamine. Some people are allergic to lobsters. And based on that, Bill Martin asked me to illustrate his brown bear. Brown bear, what do you see? In the course of 40 years, Bill and I have done 4 books. The last one is, here's Bill. He was a door opener, certainly a wonderful door opener. From him, I learned the rhythm of language and how to use it effectively, the repetition effectively. Years ago, I was at a signing tour with Bill, and in the morning he came down from his room and he said, I'm writing a story and I want to test it with you. And he held it up and it says, da, 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 or do you think it should be da, 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 da? And I said, Bill, what are you talking about? He said, first I establish a rhythm and then I put words in that. So it's something I learned from him. The last book, Baby Bear, what do you see? He left the manuscript for me before he died, and this was a wonderful relationship and a door opener. After I had done the book with Bill, I asked myself, what if I were an author as well? And I developed all kinds of ideas and put them in an idea box. The simple heartbeat of Brown Bear set me on fire. I quit my position at the advertising agency because it was becoming more and more of an administrative job. Memos, business travel, meetings, drinking with clients, and it just did not suit me. And so I became a freelance designer. And I left my portfolio overnight with art directors at publishing firms, for instance. And then the art director would look at it. And in this case, I was asked to illustrate a cookbook called Red Flannel Hash and Shoe Fly Pie. I was asked to do 6 chapter openings, but it was such an interesting book that I did 60. And the editor, her name is Anne Benedus, I think felt obligated to take me out for lunch. And during the lunch, she also told me that she's the children's book editor as well. And I said, well, I have this idea box. And one thing led to the next. And a year later, 1, 2, 3 to the Zoo was published. Since I was not so sure about grammar and spelling and commas, I made this into a wordless book. But Anne reassured me. She said, I'm not interested in ideas. I'm interested in ideas, not grammar and punctuation. A good lesson, by the way. How encouraging. Here's Anne and I. It's been a long, wonderful relationship, and she has been a wonderful door opener for me. To illustrate my books, I use collage technique. Now, there's nothing new about collage technique. Picasso, Matisse do collages. Picture book artists like Leone and Ezra Jack Keats do collages. To create my own painted papers, I store them in color-coded drawers. Go back to the one. Here I paint the papers, and then I let them dry, and then they go into, this is just half of the file cabinets that I have. I'm very interested in textures, both in nature and in paintings. Here, for instance, if you look at the water and the entire picture, big picture, you look at the water and then look at a small blown-up swatch of that. Go to the next one. Between his eye and her hat, I enlarged that. You see her face a little and his eye a little bit. And that's, you see how. And here's the Van Gogh. It's a little bit underneath the sun, and then it's blown up. Or I'm the kind of guy that upsets museum guards very much. Because I always walk like this. Okay. One day, I playfully, even absent-mindedly, punched holes into a stack of paper, and looking at the holes, I thought of a bookworm. The bookworm became the green worm, because Anne wasn't so happy with the worm. We sat together and she said, I don't know, we have to come up with something else. And we went through all kinds of animals. At one point she said caterpillar, and I said butterfly. Otherwise the book was just all ready. Okay, we got this. I've been very fortunate. Many doors helped me on my way, and so my wife and I decided that it was time to give back. With the help of generous friends, publishers, and a gift of 7 acres from Hampshire College, we have built a 40,000 square foot museum, the Eric Carle Museum of Picture Books, which opened in the year 2002. It has 3 galleries, a library, an auditorium, a cafeteria, a gift shop, and for the lobby, I have created these panels in the background there. My editor once said to me, your books are literature for the not yet reader and for beginning readers. With the museum, we hope to open the doors for children in art, literature, and things that we call culture. But the museum is not a children's museum, it's a museum for all. So come and visit. I feel terrible that I have been unable to provide you with any helpful hints that might enhance your work as an educator. Now, however, there's one thing here that I've done with children. And this is how it goes. For the educators here, you have to do this with children. Okay, you all stare at the red hose. That's me, by the way, holding the red hose. So what you do, you stare at that red hose, you stare at it, and you get bored. You're not moving your eyes, you're looking at it, and you don't photograph it, and you're looking, and you stare at it, and you stare at it, and keep staring at that. You see anything happening? Another color faintly coming through? Do you? Well, Goethe, I hope I'm not talking too long. Goethe, who is, in the German language, is considered like Shakespeare is considered in the English-speaking world. And he, a writer, playwright, and so forth. But he was 200 years ago traveling in Italy, and he was tired, and he went into a tavern, and he sat down, and there was a white wall, and a waitress in a red dress was taking an order from another table, and he kind of absentmindedly and tired stared at her, and then she walked away, and he kept staring at the wall at a greenish image appeared, just like here. And based on that, he developed the Goethe's color theory. And he claimed later in his life That was his his greatest achievement, was his color therapy, color theory. One of the pleasures of being a picture writer is receiving letters from children, from around the world, in fact, but most come from the United States. And here is my most favorite letter. Dear Eric, your books are good. Our teacher made us read all your books. Will you ever retire? And with that, I will retire from my speech. Thank you. Well, see, I have covered everything. Now, the first question usually is, where do ideas come from? I know that. Children always say, where do ideas come from? A child wrote to me, where do ideas come from? But he also provided the answer. He said, they come from the outside and from your inside. And I couldn't answer that any better than that. The last book for Bill Martin was Baby Bear, and that came out 3 years ago, and I haven't done anything since. And I'm not doing any books anymore. I have a studio, and I do all kinds of graphics, interesting things, but not children's books anymore. It's strange. It just happened, and I have no problem with that. I'm very happy. Well, I've always considered myself a graphic artist, a designer foremost than anything else. And as I mentioned in the speech, it's only after I did Brown Bear that I asked myself what an author should, if I were an author, what would I write? I really don't give much thought to your question. I must be very intuitive. I'm truly surprised that my work has become so well accepted and beloved. I'm intuitive. That's all I can say. Well, yes. I don't have one favorite, but Leo Leone would be foremost, not because he got me a job, but because I think we are in the same wavelength. We're both European. We're both influenced by the Bauhaus, I think, by the simplicity of designs. Our books are designed more than anything else. I showed the posters I did before. Each of my pictures is a little poster. In a poster, the idea of a poster is you have 4 seconds to see it, and it has to say shoes or toothpaste or flowers or travel. You don't have much time, and that's what I do my work, not consciously, but I think that's yeah. Yes.
Through your stories, you transmit both art and also the story itself. So if you had to pick, which one do you think is the most fulfilling? That the children enjoy your story so much, or that they enjoy your pictures so much?
Yeah. Again, I must disappoint you. I really do the books for myself. I think that is true of most creative people. You know, I'm not comparing myself to Beethoven, but I'm sure he didn't write for the people. He wrote for himself. Or Picasso, he didn't do that for the people. He does it for himself. It sounds a little arrogant, but I think that's how it's done. However, I work with, as I mentioned before, I work with an editor. So some adjustments are made. I mean, you're bound by 32 pages. Most picture books are 32 pages. So the cover would be number 1. The next 2 pages, 2 and 3, would be the end sheet. 4 and 5 is usually inside title. So you have about 12, 14 double spreads to tell your story. And then I make a decision, is this going to be a symphony, or is this going to be a quartet, or is this going to be a solo, you know? It has to flow into each other, has to have a certain rhythm. Those I have to consciously think about, I think. But most of it is just, I'm entertaining myself. I love to work with colors like I did in kindergarten. I mentioned before that my classroom in Syracuse was big and big windows and lots of light streaming in. And a number of years ago, a friend came in and looked at my studio. And I have a big studio with big windows with a lot of light coming through the window. So I recreated that. Yes.
But I don't get it.
You don't get it? I'll write a book for you so you'll get it.
I've got a question over here.
Oh.
I was wondering about your process.
Yeah.
And I mean, all artists work in different ways, and I was wondering if you sort of worked with your collage pieces first, and like collage images out of that, or if you're doing drawings first, like about that.
Well, first the collages I learned about in art school. It's one of the techniques I learned, lithography, photography, all these things, but collage. Big shapes always appeal to me. Schneidler, my teacher, encouraged that. For instance, I learned etching with a fine needle. He said, "You're not so good with that, don't do it." I tried calligraphy. He said, "No, Mr. Carle, no, it's not good." So he also guided me into big, bold shapes. And then my first job was a poster artist, big, bold shapes. I've always liked that. I don't know if is this an indirect, did I answer that or not? Oh, yeah. In art school, we painted our own papers, and that's a long story. It's another speech almost. When I was an advertiser, you saw the lobster, right? I did. As an art director, I had accounts, and every year I had to come up with a new style. So one year was photography, next year you hired an illustrator, next year was big title, next year little title, whatever. So the fifth year, what am I going to do this year? And I remembered the collages of my art school days. And I did a series of lobsters and all kinds of things in collage style. And that's how I came back to collages and large things. And I paint these papers without, I call it papers, they're really tissue papers. And I just start painting in yellows and look at it and put red dots on it, and it looks good, and I put some blue dots on it, doesn't look so good, and then and then put it down to dry, and I make a whole series of yellows with reds and others with greens and others with oranges, and then I take carpet things and make prints and all kinds of things. What I'm trying to say, I don't make the papers with a book in mind. It's just in 99.9 cases, I did a book on clouds, so I had to make cloudy kind of things for that. I think this would be a lecture almost.
Hi, Mr. Carle, if I could just build on what you said a few moments ago about how you are intuitive, and you're very humble. You're standing there saying you don't know what to say to a room full of educators about education, when I think that you're an amazing educator and you are incredibly intuitive. Not only do you have a gift, I think you are a gift. I'm a first grade teacher and a kindergarten teacher, and I've been working for almost 20 years with young children. And nothing that I have seen in all my years of experience or in the 3 education degrees that I've earned connects with children the way that your work does. And you intuitively know how to differentiate for children, which is a challenge that we all work with every day in our classrooms, how to make something engaging and appropriate for every child that's in front of us. Your book, for example, The Grouchy Ladybug, is just a fun story for the children who are only ready for a fun story, but the information about aphids and ladybugs and the sun rising and setting in the sky and the clocks in the corner, you scaffold their learning for the children who are ready for it, and for everyone else, it's just an awesome story. So I really, on behalf of teachers everywhere, would like to thank you for all that you've done for early literacy. You are just amazing.
Thank you so much for saying these kind things. Thank you.
What made you start making these books?
What made me start making these books? Because someone by the name of Bill Martin had written a story, and he asked me, would you do the pictures? So I did the pictures. And after I had done the pictures, I said, now, maybe I can write a story too, and I began to write stories. That's how I started out.
Before I ask this question, let me say I have a great fondness for the state of Texas, but I was at a recent talk by Jonathan Kozel, and he mentioned that your book, your most recent book, was banned by the Texas State Board of Education because Bill Martin had written a lot of socialist books, and it turns out that it was the wrong Bill Martin who had written it. But they still kept the books banned, from what I understand. Can you speak to that incident in particular, and maybe censorship in general?
Well, books, yes. Books, I forget who said it. He said, books who burn books will later burn people. And I mean, this Texas thing was more funny than anything else, because as you said, the other Bill Martin wrote a book on Marxism or something. I'm sure he's never gotten so much attention since. But we live in I talked to you about Herr Krauss, who showed me the forbidden art he could have been, the minimum would have been losing his job. More likely he would have been arrested or something for showing degenerate art to his students. So, contrast that to this. The person on that board wanted to prove how, I think it was a woman, how astute she is, and so forth. And I'm going to, I don't have much to say. I have a nephew in Texas, and I wrote him an email, and I said, what's wrong with you Texans? Isn't there anything you can do? And he wrote back, help me out, Bobby. Oh, yeah. He wrote, I'm living deep in the heart of stupid. Yeah, there have been other incidents. Which book was that? Draw Me a Star. I don't know if you know in that one, there's a nude couple in there, but it's very graphic, not graphic, very bold, poster-like, and that has been banned in some places. And one in that book, in the end, I write about my grandmother who drew a star for me, and it goes, Krie, Gra, Grattenfuß, Gänse laufen barfuß, and you have a star. And that woman wrote me, your grandmother would be ashamed of you because of the nude couple in there. Well, Adam and Eve are. It's the only way I could show them. You are from Texas, or you just...
I'm sorry?
You're from Texas?
I'm not from Texas. I'm from Massachusetts.
No, actually, I've been in Texas a number of times to science books. People are very nice people there. I don't know why they're so crazy at times.
Yeah.
Do you use anything else instead of paintbrushes or paint?
Do I use anything besides paper? Paintbrushes? Yeah, I do some other things which I haven't shown. One book I showed was done linoleum cuts. You know how that's done? I don't know if you do that. You take linoleum and you cut, and then you make a print from it. I've done a book with Norton Juster, who did the Toll Booth book, and I did pen and ink drawings. Good example is the chameleon book I did. I did that differently. I did it with crayon. It didn't sell. So my publisher said, do it in collage, and I did it in a collage, and it sells. But I like to experiment with all kinds of things. I haven't shown anything here. I even do photography, experimental things. I do experimental things with glass and silk and metal. Yeah, that's fun. Yes?
You have, what do you think about the changing patterns of the consumption of media by children, and I guess specifically what I'm talking about is increased consumption through digital devices.
Yeah, yeah.
iPhones, iPads. Now you're seeing traditional children's stories as an app. And I actually just saw one on an iPad that was pretty neat, but obviously a completely different experience.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you had opinion on that.
Yeah, I'll make a little story of that. Prehistoric times. The storyteller sits around a fire, and the cave children come out, and he's telling stories about the moon and all these things. Then a couple of thousand years forward, we come to somebody reading from a book on paper. Then we go forward, we get to computers, and we go forward. So, to me, it doesn't matter. I prefer paper, I prefer books. I like to hold books. But I'm sure in 50 years, paper will be out, and there'll still be literature. That's the point, is that, not the medium.
Out of all the books you've ever illustrated, what is your favorite?
Good, yes. Do You Want to Be My Friend, which I showed before. It's maybe not all that well known, that book as The Caterpillar, because of friendship and the emotional part of it. I don't think The Caterpillar has that emotional thing that the friend book has. The difference with The Caterpillar is the success of The Caterpillar versus the friendship book. The Caterpillar, I mean, my editors and my publishers and my friends, we sit around, why is it so successful? No one really knows why. But maybe it is a book of hope that you, ugly little thing, can grow up to be a beautiful butterfly with and fly into the world with your talents. A book of hope that you can, I remember, I was worried, will I grow up? Will I be tall? Will I be able to read? Will I be able to pay, and maybe that is the success of it. But I just liked emotionally the friendship, a simple little gesture there. Yes?
I have a quick story of thanks. I teach 5th and 6th graders, and one of my 5th graders this year had the opportunity to read to the junior kindergarten class in Cambridge. And he was very, very nervous, and he really, really struggles with reading. But I brought, a huge box of books that were, my favorites or ones that people had given me. And he saw The Grouchy Ladybug, and he said, I love that book. He's like, I want to read that book. And it was one of the few times that I had seen him feel really proud and capable in his reading. And after reading to like a small group of 2 or 3, he's asked every week, can I go back? Can I be another guest reader? And I've really seen a confidence in him. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If you have I could, this may take a few minutes. I don't know if I should do that, but
One little girl.
oh yes,
How many books have you written?
70.
Wow.
I like to read a little something. It's pertinent. This is at the end of the story. You will realize why it's pertinent. Albert Chen in 1990 wrote this essay to be admitted at Harvard. That's why I would like to read it. And this is his essay. Show and tell was always a special occasion in Mrs. Pitt's kindergarten class. Every Friday, 2 or 3 of us would bring in a prized possession to talk about in front of the class. One day, James brought in his Star Wars action figures, and Andrea brought in her favorite doll. That day, I brought in my favorite book, The Very Hungry Caterpillar, and read it to class. In the light of the moon, a little egg lay on a leaf. One Sunday morning, the warm sun came up, and pop out of the egg came a tiny and very hungry caterpillar. I started reading at the age of 4, and by kindergarten, I was well into Dr. Seuss and Mother Goose. My interest in reading was fostered by my parents and relatives. On Tuesday, he ate through 2 pears, but he was still hungry. After kindergarten, my interest ran into animals and dinosaurs, reflected by my subscription to Ranger Rick and numerous dinosaur books. I'll shorten it a little bit. No? Okay. Ranger Rick and numerous dinosaur books. I subscribed to the magazine for 7 years, reading them from cover to cover and enjoying the spectacular pictures. I was indisputable authority on animals and dinosaurs for our entire family. On Wednesday, he ate through 3 plums, but he was still hungry. By the 3rd grade, I was the Hardy Boy fanatic, living vicariously through the intrepid adventures and experience of Frank and Joe Hardy. I recall my mother borrowing many biographies around this time. She wanted me to learn from the examples of many famous figures, Sir Winston Osler, Harry S. Truman, and others. These books helped tremendously in shaping my values at an early age. On Thursday, he ate through 4 strawberries, but he was still hungry. My introduction to classics came in the 4th grade with Treasure Island and Little Men by Louisa May Alcott became my favorite writers for quite a while. The sense of family unity and fortitude reflecting in her writing paralleled my own experience. My mother had just been hospitalized for 2 weeks, and in the meantime, my 2 aunts were taking care of my sister and me. I still rely heavily on my family for support and direction. National Geographic and Discover entered my life at the same time. The first personal computer was entering homes, and I became familiar with them quickly. I used an article in Microchips from National Geographic, my first research paper. My interest in science and technology was satisfied by both magazines. I also began reading Time and Newsweek, mirroring my growing awareness of the world events. Reading for pleasure was mostly science fiction and fantasy, especially Isaac Asimov and Susan Cooper. On Friday, he ate through 5 oranges, but he was still hungry. Middle school marked my first exposure to serious poetry. Emily Dickinson's I Am Nobody and Samuel Taylor Coleridge's Rime in the Ancient Mariner being the most memorable. Frankly, I don't recall learning much of anything from middle school, but I do remember starting to go to bookstores to actually buy books instead of searching through libraries. On Saturday, he ate through 1 piece of chocolate cake, 1 ice cream cone, 1 pickle, 1 slice of Swiss cheese, 1 slice of salami, 1 lollipop, 1 piece of cherry pie, 1 sausage, 1 cupcake, and 1 slice of watermelon. That night, he had a stomach ache. The next day was Sunday. The caterpillar ate through 1 nice green leaf. After that, he felt much better. High school has broadened my reading horizons immensely. My teachers have guided me through the intricacies of Shakespeare and more serious classic, ranging from works by contemporary authors like Doctorow, Kurt Vonnegut, literary giants like Faulkner and Hemingway. My personal appetite have become even more eclectic, while fantasy authors such as Stephen R. Donaldson and Catherine Kurtz still rule my bookshelves. I read whatever piques my interest at the time, be it Tom Clancy, Clive Barker, or James Lovelock. Now he wasn't hungry anymore, and he wasn't a little caterpillar anymore. He was a big, fat caterpillar. He built a small house called a cocoon around himself. He stayed inside for more than 2 weeks. Then he nibbled a hole in the cocoon, pushed his way out, and he was a beautiful butterfly. As the story unfolded that day in Miss Pitt's class, I poked my fingers through the holes that the caterpillar ate in the food. We all shared the laughter and fascination. When the butterfly finally emerged from the cocoon, everyone applauded my performance, and best of all, I was rewarded with the honor of being the wake-up fairy for the day. Reading has played a major role in defining almost every aspect of my life. My wings are painted with a myriad of colors of my life experience. The greens and browns of nature and earth, the red passion of strength and loyalty, the rich purples of history, the metallic promise of the future, and the rainbow colors of dreams and the impossible. He was accepted at Harvard. Is now a successful physician.
Well, I know that you all join me in thanking Eric Carle, and They're going to bring a table and chair up here, and he has agreed to sign books, probably one per customer, not personalized. There are books outside for sale from Harvard Bookstore, and I guess the line's going to start right over there and go out the door. So if you want to have your book signed, you're welcome to.